with like healing in general, it's easy to kind of like separate it in that sense of like, okay, well, my digestion's over here or the pain's over here, but then my life is this other thing. But it's actually a lot of the times, and especially when we look at the nervous system, how you show up in your life will impact health and wellness. And so bringing more joy back into people's life and bringing more fun back into people's life and allowing people to do things that make them uncomfortable is actually a really big part of healing. And somewhere, at least for me, along the lines, I lost that. How can we help expand that capacity within the nervous system from people through things they do in their life every single day to help them actually heal the conditions that they come in with? Typically with a trigger, if we look at amygdala and then something called our hippocampus and our prefrontal cortex. So our amygdala is going to be that alarm bell that is on fire. So if it's on fire, it's like, hey, there's been a loop that hasn't been closed of a past trauma. And so when we get a trigger, our brain goes right back into that of like, am I actually going through that? Or are we just feeling the emotions of it? Like, well, if your nervous system is on and upregulated, then no matter what we do to try and regulate inflammation, it's not going to work as effectively as if your nervous system was regulated or had more capacity. And that typically goes unchecked of like, you're fine, your labs are okay, but there's something that's not okay. If we're going back to the basics, like I know I need to drink water. I know I need to eat fruits and vegetables and enough protein and, you know, maybe take the basics and I just can't bring myself to do it. Typically, then that's also where I'm looking at the nervous system. Our minds are absolutely fascinating that they will do everything and anything possible to avoid typically feeling what we're avoiding feeling. Trauma typically happens in, or does happen in relationship with somebody else. So healing is going to have to happen in relationship with somebody else. Yeah. The shitty stuff you go through, if you can get to a place of like, wow, I'm so glad that happened. But it's like so freeing and it's so great. Yeah, I'm at a point in my life where I'm just so deeply grateful that all of that happened, because I wouldn't be who I am today without going through those things. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can they actually heal their chronic illness through mind work or brain work? Okay, welcome back, Wellness Ninjas, to another episode of the Wellness Dojo Podcast. My name is Kyle Craig. I'm your host, and I'm excited to have my friend Dr. Amy Morrison here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me back.
Yeah, of course. It's my pleasure.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Last time we talked a lot about gut health, right?
Yeah.
And we were just talking off microphone about how like life just evolves so much. So
totally,
it's great to have you here, and I'm excited to hear about like what's evolved in your life.
Yes, how this got to what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
So digestion, as we talked about last time, is such a big part of my practice still. And just watching how the more we learn and the more things evolve, and of course new research comes out, and then how the nervous system, of course, impacts the gut. And so it's really been very like educational to still work in that realm of things, but kind of just go next step with people. If like the original protocols and a lot of what we talked about last time with like terrain and the microbiome and those protocols, if they work, fantastic. But if they don't work, kind of what's the next step that follows after that and follows after that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the things, like, first of all, I love following you on social media because you keep things fun. And it's like, even though I know you're very like science-based, you keep things very fun and light and really practical. So I always love seeing that content. But one of the things that you've been talking a lot more about that I've noticed is like just healing in general, and like healing in a holistic way. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Totally. I thank you for following. It's been a journey in its own. And I think it's very easy, or at least what I see in practice is we kind of put health in this box on the side and then life almost in another box, but it's actually that they're very intertwined with each other. And so with like healing in general, it's easy to kind of like separate it in that sense of like, okay, well, my digestion's over here or the pain's over here, but then my life is this other thing. But it's actually a lot of the times, and especially when we look at the nervous system, how you show up in your life will impact health and wellness. And so, you know, from like the fun part of it, I really think that bringing more joy back into people's life and bringing more fun back into people's life and allowing people to do things that make them uncomfortable is actually a really big part of healing. And somewhere, at least for me along the lines, I lost that. And so maybe that's why I'm more focused on that too. But it's how can we help expand that capacity within the nervous system from people through things they do in their life every single day to help them actually heal the conditions that they come in with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you just mentioned like you feel like you lost that at a certain point. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Totally. I don't know. I think we kind of get into this, at least when I reflect back on my life. My whole life I've played sports since I was really young. My whole life I've been in school and then moved right into a career. So I just, I felt like I got into these tracks that I'm really good at. It's like, okay, I can show up and play a sport and be pretty good at it. Like, that's just how it is for me, or at least it doesn't make me feel uncomfortable. Same thing with like education and learning. I feel really comfortable there, really comfortable in practice. But then if I were to step outside of that box for me, it's like, well, actually, I'm just going to go back into that box. And so as life happens, some things change. And last year I was like, I'm going to buy a musical instrument. Like never once really have, I mean, I was in band in junior high, but not anything
mandatory band class.
So I bought this and I was like, wow, it's actually so interesting how uncomfortable I feel playing this musical instrument in my home by myself, no one to judge me. It was like, well, this is just a different kind of thing for me. And so that really opened my eyes up to like, where else in my life am I actually preventing myself from trying things because it's not in my two usual paths that I'm in. And so then that kind of led to a snowball effect of like, let's go out there and just try everything and everything, like anything that I possibly can that I'm called to or I feel like I want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do you think that's evolved the way that you've approached like your practice as a naturopathic doctor?
Yeah. So my practice has changed a little bit since last time we chatted too. So now I do more of a like QEEG or brain mapping. So looking at how people's brains are functioning. So you can actually get a really good look into what's going on into their bodies, but seeing when people's nervous systems are really upregulated or stuck in that fight or flight state. Now it's like, okay, how can we use things in their life to actually help build capacity within that state for them so that we can get them out of that, or at least they can feel more comfortable in different regions. We're not always in this like area that we're more frustrated or always go like this. It's like we're just in this high vibration. And so helping me, or like me learning to actually expand my capacity through every day of life has allowed me to actually also help coach people in practice to do the same that way.
Yeah. I love that, because I think that's so much of being a practitioner is taking your experience and like almost sometimes I feel like we have to go through the hard in order to be able to help people. And it's kind of cliche now, but it's like your struggle becomes the roadmap to somebody else's success, right? But it's like, how else do you really relate to the people that you're trying to help unless you've kind of been through it?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, totally. And then when you say like, I know that this is uncomfortable, it's like, okay, I actually do know that this is uncomfortable. I did just go through something similar, or, I had a really great conversation with somebody yesterday about doing something bad on purpose. Cause it's like, there's like that perfectionism tendency you can see in a lot of people, and it can be very paralyzing. And so it's like, well, actually, if we do something poorly on purpose in a controlled manner, even just thinking about it, it was like, oh, that makes them feel really uncomfortable, but it's like, you're still in a safe space. And that's just slowly helping to build that capacity. But it's like, if I can sing poorly in the shower or in the car, or I can draw bad on purpose, like someone else can do it too. And I know that they'll be okay. Yeah.
It's kind of like when you get into a relationship where you can like finally be yourself.
Yes.
Almost, or you can be like your weirdest version of yourself or something. And then you're just like, it feels so like regulating almost, right? Where you're not like on edge or like worried that you're going to do something, then they're not going to like you or something. You're like, I can just be myself.
Totally. It's like just that extra level of confidence underneath that. Because with a lot of like, back to that example, like a perfectionism tendency, it's there for a reason, because they don't want to be seen, or they don't want to be seen as whatever narrative is under that. But if it's like you can just show up and be who you are and not even be worried about it, it almost like takes that up another notch for people with that. Like, this is me, who I authentically am. I'm a little bit weird or whatever that might be. And it's like, it doesn't actually matter at the end of the day what the other person is there for.
That's right. Yeah. And we're all a little bit weird.
Totally. Exactly.
In our own ways. But I loved what you said about too, like the brain mapping and like finding that connection between the brain and the body, really.
Yeah.
Right. Which we kind of touched on with gut health
Yes.
as well.
Yeah.
But I think so much more we've been learning now about like how stress and fight or flight and trauma really impacts not just your brain and not just your nervous system, but how that impacts like everything in your body, including illness, right?
Yeah, it's huge. And I was just fortunate enough to kind of land in the spot that I am to learn about this, but it's, again, with digestion, it's like the people that get better, and then you're going to have a percentage that doesn't, and then a percentage that has more symptoms. Then you kind of get into this overarching umbrella of like this chronic complex illness. And it typically looks like symptoms in a bunch of different areas of your body. So maybe digestive symptoms and also brain symptoms, anxiety, ADHD, maybe some heart issues, maybe some breathing issues. And it's kind of like, maybe nothing's really wrong on lab work, but something is imbalanced. And so usually it will come back to some sort of inflammatory cascade. But then again, why isn't the system responding the way that we typically think it should, right? We have all this research, it should react this way. And then there's going to be a percentage of the population that doesn't. But then when you look at their brain map, it is interesting because a lot of the times that percentage is going to be in that upregulated state when they are in fight or flight or even a faint or freeze. And so when you give them a treatment that should theoretically move the needle somewhat and it doesn't, then why is their body, it's almost like their body still thinks that treatment is a threat. And a lot of times people will be like, I can't rest, because rest might actually feel very threatening to them, even though, like, you know, the prescription for burnout and fatigue, relax, but it's like relax actually might be upregulating their nervous system.
Creates more stress.
Yeah. So it's fascinating to see actually in the activity of people's brains, what it can show us about what state they're in, because then we already have a starting point of like, you actually need to work on this capacity of your nervous system first over this nutrient or this 5E or whatever the other recommendations might be. Yeah.
Well, I know I've even experienced this where I'm going to my doctor with symptoms of like various different things. We run all the tests and check everything out, and it's like everything's normal. Like we have nothing to worry about. And it's almost like, well, easy for you to say, like there's nothing to worry about, but there's clearly a problem here.
Yeah.
And then it's so easy to just be like, well, it must just be stress then.
Yes.
Right. But then also you don't just want to blame everything on stress. So I'm curious, can you tell me a little bit about like what that actually looks like when you're like looking at the brain? What kind of things are we actually seeing? And
so totally. Because a lot of, I think people, it is like chalked up to stress or mental health, right? Especially for like women's health and women's hormones. And so what we can actually see in the brain map is going to be different regions of the brain. So one is called like the amygdala, which that is going to be our like alarm or detection center. So when we have had trauma or any type of actually overwhelm in the past that is too much for our body's ability to cope from that stressor or that overwhelm, then our amygdala is going to remember that, so that in the future we don't want to go through that again, right? Like I was uncomfortable, I was overwhelmed, I wanted to do everything in my power to avoid something like that again. And so we can actually see in the brain map when that amygdala is going to be in that upregulated state.
Is that like a trigger technically?
Yeah. So like typically with a trigger, if we look at amygdala and then something called our hippocampus and our prefrontal cortex. So our amygdala is going to be that alarm bell that is like, I call it like on fire. So if it's on fire, it's like, okay, there's been a loop that hasn't been closed of a past trauma. Then our hippocampus is going to be that memory center that we want to remember that. And typically when a trigger happens, it's because that hippocampus, when we have those memories, ideally it's like filed away nice in a logical order and they're kind of closed. But when it's been too overwhelming and we can't close that loop, it's almost like all these files are open. And so when we get a trigger, our brain goes right back into it of like, am I actually going through that episode or time frame right now? Or are we just feeling the emotions of it? And what happens between those two when the amygdala is on, the hippocampus isn't working as well, so we don't know memory versus current state. Also, our prefrontal cortex, which is like the rational part of our brain, also turns off. So we have like this fire trigger, and then we don't have our rational or memory bank that's associated with actually being able to modulate our response in that situation. So a trigger can bring you back to like that flashback of memories. But yes, it's usually because that amygdala is upregulated, our hippocampus isn't working effectively, and our cortex is like completely offline.
Yeah. And then you mentioned like it goes through this process of like, am I actually experiencing this right now? And a lot of times people will feel it like in their body. Like you feel that physical sensation of like whether it's the heart rate increasing or different physical sensations that people get. What's happening there?
Yeah. So the amygdala is going to be attached to something called our HPA axis, or hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal axis. And our amygdala is going to fire instantly versus our prefrontal cortex, which is more like our slow, rational brain, takes a lot longer to kick in. So when we get that trigger, our heart rate goes up, we're sweating, we're running, whatever it is, that's going to be that immediate response. We're going to get that adrenaline dump right away. And it might take you, depending on, again, that capacity within the nervous system, a couple seconds to realize, oh, no, actually, that we're not in that memory. A couple days, couple weeks, couple years, depending on how the system is going to respond to that. And so that's actually going to be that connection of, we get the trigger, our amygdala is upregulated, our threat detection is on, that alarm bell is going off right away. We're going to get an adrenaline dump through that. And then at some point, hopefully that cortex will follow up and be like, no, it's okay. One of the examples I'll give for that is like, if you're coming around the corner and I jump out and scare you, instantly you're like, ah, or like maybe you would go to punch, and then you'll see that it's me and you'll be like, it's okay. Like, haha, we can laugh about it. But that's going to be that adrenaline dump to start. And then your prefrontal cortex is that slow after the fact, oh no, it's okay. Or maybe I do have to run, right? Either way with that. And so that's going to be that cascade that when we have that trauma and our amygdala's firing, we're going to have more of that HPA axis quicker to fire over and over and over again. And so unless we become aware that that is what is happening, we're almost going to perceive things as threats that aren't threats anymore. So, the first time somebody goes through a trigger, it might actually be a trigger that is related to the situation that they went through, where over time it might be like, that person gave me a dirty look, and we have this huge flooding of memories, but maybe they didn't actually give them a dirty look, but our brain is just going to try and predict what might be the situation or the worst case scenario from that. And then it's always going to go down more of like that, I'll call it like the negative pathway, or just like the amygdala is trying to be like the bodyguard almost. Exactly. Of like, hey, we don't want to experience that again, so I'm going to like be watching for everything. Yes, totally. Every little thing, even if it's 1% remotely close to anything you've experienced that made you a bit uncomfortable, or you didn't have the skills at that time to cope with what was going on, we're out of here. And like we've all experienced too, when you're nervous or when you're feeling anxious or something, it's like the feeling in your stomach, like the butterflies that you get. Right. It's like anytime for martial arts, when I go to compete, like I always have the same feeing. No matter how experienced I am, it's always there. But you learn to cope with it. You learn to recognize that, oh, this is just nerves, right? Or so if something with trauma that's maybe feels a little bit more severe for somebody, if they are not like building that awareness or like building that recognition or building the skills to cope through that, I imagine that it's not just going to be like the butterflies that you feel in your stomach anymore. There's going to start to become some real issues with their health. Yeah. And with that, the HPA axis, when our cortisol levels are more elevated for a long period of time, typically our immune system is going to be really like one of the first things that's impacted by that. And then really there's like everything in your body can be impacted from that as well. And so it's not, especially in the trauma world, we really want a safe space for somebody to be able to like experience those sensations or be able to process them. It's not, go out and just re-traumatize yourself or like be in that loop all the time. So there is, treatments, and we do neurofeedback at the clinic that helps to bring that alarm bell down so that it's not just up all of the time. But yes, from a downstream health perspective, that's typically where I do see the ones that are potentially the cases that don't respond the way that I would expect them to respond to certain treatments if there isn't being work done on that axis. So what do some of those treatments look like? So neurofeedback. So the initial QEEG or the brain map, they're it's like this, it almost looks like a shower cap that goes on your head, but there's 19 different channels, and we're really just reading the brainwave frequencies to see what's happening in your brain. I always like to think that your brain, for the most part, knows what's going on in your body. 70% of your body is going to be talking to your brain. So it's like, okay, what's going on here? And then from that, we develop a protocol to do something called neurofeedback, but it's 19 channel training. So we're just giving the brain a positive or negative reward depending on what brain waves are being balanced. So the positive reward, if your eyes are open, you're watching a TV show. If your eyes are closed, you're listening to music. You can see the screen or hear the music. And then if it's kind of doing the old pathway, or that alarm bell is going off, or not integrating that information, the program just fades out. So you can't really see the TV, can't really hear the music. And then your brain likes energy efficiency. It doesn't want to fill in all those gaps. So it's like, okay, we like it when we can watch TV and we can listen to music. And so it's just that contrast back and forth. And similar to like going to the gym, if you only ever lift 5 pounds, you'll only be able to lift 5 pounds. So we still want to continue to move the needle and make it a bit harder and a bit harder and a bit harder.
Yeah. So how are you, like, it sounds like you're almost like trying to like give them like small triggers in a way to see like how the brain responds to it. Is that correct?
So we do, I mean, it will depend on the day. So if somebody is, if somebody's a little bit more fatigued that day, then we would make it a little bit easier. If somebody is feeling better that day or the treatment's going well, we make it a bit harder. But it's not actually a trigger per se. It's just like when your brain is doing, because we read the brainwave frequencies in real time. So when it's doing the new pathway, because we're training certain regions, then when those regions are doing kind of the way that we want them to perform, then you'll be able to see the TV. And when they go back to the old pathway, then you won't really be able to see. So we're really just creating kind of new connections or new neuronal pathways in the brain. And when they start to fire those, then you can see the TV. And then with the over time, because we'll continue to strengthen those pathways, not in neurofeedback, once the new ones become stronger than the old ones, and it's kind of your new way of being until something else happens or you change again.
What are some of the common things that you're seeing, like where people are coming in? I imagine there's a lot of chronic illness that comes in where it's like they've been dealing with either an autoimmune system issue that just like nobody's been able to figure out. Is that kind of mostly what you're seeing come in, or?
Yeah, I see kind of two sides of the, I'm going to say, group. So one with the neurofeedback, lots of concussions, ADHD, anxiety, depression. If you think of like, I'm going to say brain symptoms, it's really one of the tools that we can look at to see what's actually going on in that organ. If you think of like digestion or heart, you do scopes or you do testing, they look at your heart. And so in imaging, where with the brain, they typically don't look at that. So we get a lot of that type of clientele specifically for brain mapping, concussions, and what's going on in there. And then the other half of it, where we also use it for the nervous system side of things, is the chronic complex. Most of what I work with is a condition called CIRS, or chronic inflammatory response syndrome. And so usually what triggers this for people is like a big mold exposure, Lyme disease, food poisoning, root canal infections, typically a toxin produced by another organism that's triggered this inflammatory cascade, and then their body doesn't turn it off because it's like we're in that upregulated state. And so we go through it's called the Shoemaker protocol, but kind of a step-by-step process to get that nervous or the immune system back into a regulated state there. And so that also becomes really handy because, again, it's one of those pieces of the puzzle of like, well, if your nervous system is on and upregulated, then no matter what we do to try and regulate inflammation, it's not going to work as effectively as if your nervous system was regulated or had more capacity in that. So I kind of work with those two blocks of like, I'm going to call it brain health in a way. And then, the inflammatory cascades in the system that typically goes unchecked of like, you're fine, your labs are okay, but there's something that's not okay.
Yeah. Like, I'm curious how somebody would know to like go a different route to try and like figure out like, oh, maybe this is something that's deeper than just my organs kind of, you know what I mean? Like what kind of things would be like warning signs for somebody? Like, let's say I had different symptoms. Maybe it's like digestive issues or something like that, and been to the doctor, they've run all the tests, and I'm just like, okay, maybe it's just in my head or something like that. Like, what kind of signs might I look for to be like, I think this might actually be like related to trauma or related to burnout or my nervous system just not being regulated?
So one that you mentioned, if like all labs are normal and we're not really finding a cause to it. Two would be if nothing's working. So if you are actually giving things to try and nothing's working.
Supplements
Yeah,
and stuff like
something's
that.
not working. Or I find too that they'll work for a short period of time and then symptoms will come back. It's like, we're getting there and not quite. We're getting there and not quite. The other, why I mentioned like if people are actually giving treatment protocols a try and they're not working. The other side is if like you really can't bring yourself to even do treatment protocols. If it's like, if we're going back to the basics, like I know I need to drink water. I know I need to eat fruits and vegetables and enough protein and, you know, maybe take the basics and I just can't bring myself to do it. Typically, then that's also where I'm looking at the nervous system, because there's going to be some underlying pattern that's, or like our perception or our identity within that due to typically some sort of trauma that now is preventing us from actually being able to take that next step to take care of our bodies. So I also would go that way as well. Of like, you're trying everything and nothing's working. Okay, we can look at the nervous system, or we can't even get ourselves to try.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I do work with a lot of people who'll be like, I just don't feel motivated. And I'm like, yeah, but also like there might be something else that's blocking that for you. Yeah.
100%. I love that, because like when I was doing a lot more personal training
Yes.
and nutrition coaching and stuff too, it almost every time it came down to like this something deeper.
Yes.
Right. And you would, within coaching and stuff like that, you would push deeper. You would try and get under the layers of it. And it would often come back to like, yeah, well, when I was a kid, you know, I was told don't eat that, or like there's trauma there.
Yeah.
That it has been impacting for years their ability to even feel like they can do what most people would call like the simplest things for their health.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. With like personal training and nutrition, you see that lots, I imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's super fascinating.
Yeah.
And at the surface, you might have seen this as well. It's typically not what people are, they're not even aware of it, is most of the time. Some people are, but it's like, you know, they're almost coming in and they're like, my symptom is this. And then when you actually review the case or you interact with them, you're like, but like, what about all of this over here? And it's like, oh, because when we go through things, it's almost like we just put it in a closet and we don't ever want to think about it again. And so it just goes into our subconscious. It's kind of second nature. We aren't actually aware that it happens anymore. And so then, yeah, when you're working with people and you'll notice certain things stand out and you're like, I actually don't know if this is about nutrition anymore. I don't know if this is really about that exercise anymore. I think there might be something else that we need to dig into. And yeah.
It's like the lack of habits or the lack of motivation is actually a symptom to something greater.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, it usually is.
It's interesting too. Like, I'm curious, do you think that, like, I have an opinion on this, but do you think that the information, like even like this people's access to the science and stuff like that can be like almost a problem sometimes, where it's taking us away from doing just like the basic things that create such a big impact? Right.
Totally. Yeah. I would love to hear your opinion too. But our brains are, and our minds, I should say, not our brains, our minds are absolutely fascinating, that they will do everything and anything possible to avoid typically feeling what we're avoiding feeling. And so if we have all this information about the basics, let's say, and we have information about so much stuff, we've never had, this is the most amount of information we've always had.
Yeah.
And so if we're still avoiding doing the basics or, you know, nutrition and exercising, because we need to learn more about exercise and how do I make this exercise better? And that next step, I need to learn and learn and learn, but we're still actually avoiding just doing, then it is just it's another, what's the word I'm looking for? Like coping mechanism, or it's just another way to procrastinate.
Yeah.
Doing what we're trying to avoid doing. Yeah.
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 Yeah. And my mind goes to like, we try to optimize before we try and simplify.
Yes.
Right. It's like we watch a podcast and it's like, oh, you need this, like this specific way is going to optimize your caloric intake or whatever the case might be. And it's like, but have you tried eating more vegetables? Like, have you just tried adding one serving of vegetables extra in your day?
Yeah.
Because that's something that's much more simple to sustain.
Yes.
And will have the same impact as you trying to optimize, but it'll actually be sustainable.
Yes.
Right?
It's so true. And our mind's fascinating in the sense of, I will see with people as well, if you give them like this 25-part complex, this, they'll do it. But if you're like, just drink more water, they're like, too easy.
Yeah.
I just want you to go outside first thing in the morning, get some sunlight. Can't do that. But it's like our brains almost like want complicated, whether we're going to do it or not. But it's like, it just somehow feels like it's going to be better than the basics, which
I think it's like the one, like doing the simple thing, it almost makes people feel more stupid or like more incapable, because then they're like, well, if I fail at that though, then that means that I can't do the simplest things.
Yeah.
Whereas if I fail at this like really complex thing, then at least I knew it was like, at least this was hard to do.
Totally. Yes. Yeah. It's like such a mind game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see it with my martial arts students sometimes too, where I'm like, why aren't you trying really hard? Like, I don't understand why you're not putting the effort in, right? And I think a lot of times it comes down to that. They're like, well, if I don't try super hard and then I fail, at least I know why, right? But if I give my all and then I fail, well, now it's like, that's a lot harder to swallow.
Yeah.
It's like, maybe I'm not capable of it.
Yes. Yeah. Or at least, or it's like, there's some self-worth tied up in needing to be the best or needing to perform, and that's when I get my love. And then it's just like, that deeper underneath. Yeah. And at the surface, it's like, oh, why aren't you trying really hard? But it's actually like this core trauma at some point that they've experienced. Yeah. Yeah.
Again, coming all the way under the surface always, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you feel like a lot of times in your work, you're like more of a psychologist than anything else?
Yes. Yes and no. I do. I feel like this, like with the brain mapping and the psychology of it, and I'm like currently, again, or we were talking about this a little bit before, like kind of what the next thing, I'm just like right into human behavior right now of like, why do we act the way we act? And so that I'm really fascinated by. So I'm typically always drawn more towards that side of things, but I still really do love talking to people about the basics, or like providing real medical science answers to people who don't have answers, without just always going off that way. So it's not typically a place that I do start unless they're coming in with maybe more symptoms that are anxiety, depression related, that we just know that are right into the nervous system, and then we can have that conversation. But if it is just, they have some bloating, I don't jump right there. Yeah. Sometimes in the brain map, we will see that there are certain regions that are upregulated that will lead to digestive symptoms. So then I'll have that conversation. But it's probably what I'm most fascinated by. So it's, the
human behavior side of it.
The human behavior.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Right. I think it is something that we don't know a lot about. Like, we see it, we live it all the time, but we don't know the science around it and stuff like that. So I'm the same. I'm always curious. Like, I could sit and watch people at the mall even, and that would be like, that's my TV for me, because I'll just sit and watch and be like, I'm big into pattern recognition and even like the spiritual side of things and stuff like that, and like how people behave with like faith and spirituality and all that kind of stuff, because I think those things also have a big impact on not just your nervous system, but your healing as well.
Yes.
Right.
Huge. Yeah. And most of communication between humans is nonverbal. Right. So if we're like, just to go watch somebody, you can pick up a lot of cues to how they might actually be feeling inside, or what is actually going on, versus the language that we choose to use is also something. But so there's so much communication that's happening beneath the surface. And so when somebody is coming in for, I have these symptoms, it's almost reading, you're listening to the words that they're saying, but what's also the body language that's happening behind when they're speaking those words. Because again, our mind is very good at creating these stories around and protecting us from having to go into what was painful for us or whatever that might be. And so you can actually understand a lot more about somebody else just from the human behavior piece with not chatting. And some of the most like powerful work that I've experienced through courses is actually when you don't talk to somebody. Like, we don't need to use words in order to communicate with people, and that's a whole different level of healing, really.
Yeah. One of the things I've been learning a lot more about too is that, like, especially with working with like men in general, with trying to heal, like whether it's traumas or just mental health in general, it's like talk therapy. I'm not saying it doesn't work, but there's like a deeper level to it that I think men in particular have not built the skills or been taught the skills of, which is like that recognition of like how it feels in my body, which is such a huge part of healing, right? It's easy to talk about like, this is what I went through, but to actually feel like, but what does it feel like in my body? Because you mentioned like awareness being a big part of healing before, right? And that awareness of like, well, where do I feel it? How does it actually feel what did I feel there? Like that then becomes a part of like grieving and healing, right?
Yeah. And it is very fascinating. Like I'm going to say like men's circles or men's groups versus women's groups, and whether it's designed to be like that, but even just like, I'm going to say me hanging out with my girlfriends, we chat all the time about feelings and what's going on, where it's maybe less common for men to do that. You know, it's maybe more sports focused or related. So we're just speaking in very generalized terms here, but you know, less common for, like, it's not as practiced for men as it is for women on that side of things. So then when you do get together and you're like, how are you feeling? It's like, I actually maybe don't know how I felt for my whole life, for 5 years. Like, you know, so it's harder to dig deeper and into that and then feel it, because I think also there's a narrative with society of like, don't cry, don't, you know, like the
be a man,
stuff, whatever the kind of those slogans that we had growing up. And so it's with the awareness piece of that, it's trauma typically happens in, or it does happen in relationship with somebody else. So healing is going to have to happen in relationship with somebody else. Yeah. And so
true.
Yeah. And so, you know, sitting with your thoughts and feelings is part of it, because that might be where you originally feel safe. But at some point, we're going to have to share that with somebody else. And from an energetic side of things, like you mentioned, more spiritual as well, like 1 + 1 when it comes to healing does not equal 2, it equals 3. And so we have like this extra energetic field that's there to help move that energy and help heal when you are with somebody else, versus if you're just alone, then you're just in your own stuff, right? So it can be super powerful to have like men's groups or men help men in that sense, because it can be a little bit more of a bond there. Yeah,
there's a relational healing almost that can happen in those things. But it's, when you said that, I just thought of myself like going through like a divorce and stuff like that, and just like for so long just being like, I need to be ready before I do this again, like before I commit myself to somebody again, or but it's like the only way that you get ready is by kind of going and like practicing it almost. Like you have to go out and like be in a relationship and like and learn what's working, what's not working, and people will actually start to heal you in those ways almost unintentionally. And like you just mentioned, like the energy fields and stuff, it's crazy when you find those relationships, whether romantic or not, that like the energy the vibrations match and that type of thing. It's incredible how regulating that can be for somebody who's been through, you know, struggle and trauma in whatever that looks like.
Totally, that co-regulation. And it's interesting from a mind's perspective. That's a good point. And we're almost like, I'm going to wait until I'm ready before I get back out there. I need to do the internal work. I need to figure everything out before I do X, Y, Z, whatever might be on the end of that. But it's actually interacting with somebody else or trying something new, or putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation, like buying a musical instrument, or whatever that might be, or groups, that we actually learn who we are. And so if we don't put ourselves out there, we don't meet new people or do these things, we don't actually learn what we like and don't like. We think about it, and we can go on and on in our brain for years about thinking about how this might play out or what we want. But until we actually go do something about it, that's when we actually learn.
Yeah, I heard a quote once, like, suppression is sickness. And I'm curious your thoughts on that in terms of like what you see with people in clinic. Is there, like, the question that really came to my mind is like, can people, let's say somebody coming in with chronic illness, like, can they actually heal their chronic illness through mind work or brain work?
I'm going to say yes and no, because I feel like to see every angle of all of this, I feel like, yes, it's possible. And for some people, you know, if they are mineral deficient in something that's leading to some chronic illness, yes, we need to correct that. So yes and no. But I don't know if you look at any like Joe Dispenza's work, just some of the research he's doing. Again, it's just like interesting to see, okay, they are healing a lot of these chronic complex illnesses of people who are going in with mind work, and identity work is what it is at the end of the day. And if we can get all of that changed and then your nervous system on board, I do believe that our body has the innate ability to heal. Our body is smarter than our mind will ever be in that way. And so if we just need to get out of our own way in order for it to do what it needs to do. And getting out of our own way is really the hardest part, right? Yeah. And so that's where I do believe that it is possible, but with that caveat, if like if you are in a really moldy house, it's going to be so much harder to do that, where if we could get you into an environment or into a vessel that has all the proper nutrients and you are hydrating and you kind of have those foundations, that would be ideal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I imagine vice versa too. Like if you're doing all the right things, like you have mineral deficiencies and you're trying to correct it through supplementing, but you still are holding on to this like trauma or this like deep rooted stress or burnout that's just like it's trapped and you can't let it out. I imagine your body is also going like, well, we just can't receive this right now.
Yes.
Like we have too much to handle. We can't deal with this little supplement issue.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And when we are in that like fight or flight state or in that elevated state, all of our blood flow goes away from our digestive system. And so then that's really going to be impacted, and we're not going to be absorbing and breaking down our foods effectively. And again, a lot of digestive symptoms, a lot of constipation, we're not safe enough to like have a bowel movement, right? So it can be expressed in a lot of ways through our digestion. But yes, absolutely. Like that's why I always kind of look at it as like a two-pronged approach. One is the nervous system and one is more of like the physical side of things. But we could even expand that to like physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health, and where are those energies for our system actually being filled up and where are they being drained? And that's going to be a complete picture of what's going on in someone's system. Yeah.
And that's great. I think like we've talked a lot about like how that the nervous system and that fight or flight, like being stuck in it prolonged as well, can really impact, because it's almost like the focus is just on survival. It's like, forget about all these other little things. For now, we just need to get you to tomorrow again.
Yes, exactly.
Get you to tomorrow again.
Yes.
Right. But you mentioned like, we talked a little bit about spirituality and faith and that type of thing. And I notice, like, I could be wrong, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I noticed in your content, even like a little bit more of like this like spiritual side of things. So I was curious to ask you about that and just what impact that has been in your own life, but then also in your practice with this like science and spirituality. I think it's a really cool mix.
Yeah. In my own life, huge impact in the sense that I feel like it's allowed me to be. It's very easy again for our mind to create these stories of, I need to get this done, I need to show up, I need to prove myself in this way, and you can go on that track for years and years and years. And so with some of the people that I follow or work that I follow or communities that I've been a part of, it's really just made me more aware that we don't need to be like that. And this is where I think I actually became fascinated more about human behavior, because it's like, why, if there is like this, in my opinion, or what I believe, like, so if we're all energy, right? And we're all kind of one, and we just need to, align our vibrations. Really what's stopping us is us. And so if we can learn more about why you show up the way you show up, or why I act the way I act, why I have the thoughts when I have the thoughts, then actually that's going to allow me to be so much more me and so much more able to access that energy and more of like the spiritual side of things versus just being stuck in my brain all the time. And so it's obviously a practice that we keep going through, and it's like the next layer and next layer, but it's completely changed my life. And I think I've always had that side to me. I've always been really interested in it. I just didn't have the experience yet with like meeting the right people and learning more about it than I have over the last couple of years. And then of course your life is always going to change your practice. So I think part of actually what got me into that too was the brain mapping, because it's like, what is this? Like, why is everybody in this stress state all the time? Like this, in my opinion, I don't think that's how we're supposed to live. Kind of some of my content you said, like I genuinely think we're here to play and experience life and try these things, and how can we put ourselves out there, and by putting ourselves out there we get to know who we are, and how cool is that? And then, but I don't see that in a lot of other people's perception of what we're doing here. And so that's where I'm actually at a point right now of like, well, I care so much about this, but do other people? Like, or is that just kind of buried under the layer? So I'm still actually working with that in the sense of, this is what's true for me, and acknowledging that it might not be true for somebody else. And that's okay that it's not true for somebody else, because they're probably looking at me like, what the heck, right? So some people I have really phenomenal conversations with, and some people it just doesn't come up at all, and it's just different. Yeah.
You kind of learn your people too, like in terms of even like the vibrations and the energy and stuff. When you are resonating on that level and you have a conversation with somebody about it and they're not receptive to it, it kind of does help you like really learn like, well, who are my people? Who are the people who are kind of vibrating on that same frequency as me?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So by being like more open to your own beliefs, let's just say, I think it does really help you tap into being around more people who match that. And then it's like almost like manifesting. It's now the snowball is moving, it's building.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. I think that's so like beautifully put in a way of, if you can just show up and be who you are, true to yourself, which is always probably a learning process too, but then you will find your people versus going into groups of people that maybe you leave and you feel a bit drained, or you really have to work hard to show up and be a certain way in that. And that's all just feedback from your environment, right?
Yeah.
Everything's just feedback and showing you where you're at. And it's kind of, some of my posts have been more about like, everything's just a reflection. Like it's all about your perception of this world. And so if you can actually take that information in just as a neutral thing, like it's not good or it's bad, it's just let's be curious about it, you can learn a lot about who you are and how you show up, or why you might show up in a certain way. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you for being vulnerable with that question. I have another question for you.
Yes.
So it's the last question. So this is the question. My last guest wrote this question.
Yes. Okay.
They didn't know who was going to be on, but I'll read it to you, and then you can leave a question for my next guest as well. Okay. So their question is, what is one experience you went through that, as painful as it may have been, made you stronger and brought you insight?
That's deep. You just tears. Yeah, it's a good question, because I really don't think everything good in my life that I've had has been painful. I mean, there's other good things, but it's like, we were kind of talking about this before, in the sense of the shitty stuff you go through, if you can get to a place of like, wow, I'm so glad that happened. It's like, which is part of like where the spiritual work comes in too, but it's like so freeing and it's so great. I don't know if I'm ready to share what the experience was.
That's okay. You don't have to. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But I just think that it's like, I've had a handful in my life that come to my mind when you do see that. And it's just, yeah, I'm at a point in my life where I'm just so deeply grateful that all of that happened, because I wouldn't be who I am today without going through those things. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I always say I'm not grateful for the pain, but I'm grateful for the opportunity to grow from it.
Yes.
Right? Because when we go through those shitty things in life, when we go through those really hard things, when you're in it, it's like, why is this happening to me? I just don't understand it. But then in hindsight, a lot of the times, because we are strong, because we can get through it, in hindsight, we can look back and be like, I see why that had to happen now.
Yes.
Because I needed to, like, that's why I'm here today now. Now I have these skills that, I can show up in this relationship now the way that I can, because I had to go through that hard shit.
Totally. Yeah. I totally see that too. Like, you look back and you're like, I see where I actually was energetically prior to that, or whatever happening. I see why I went through that. I see that there's no other way that I would have learned that lesson without having to have done that. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, if we can get to that place. And I think one of my favorite quotes too, with like you just mentioned, the pain, it's like, life, it's going to give you pain, but it's our choice if we want to suffer through that. And so it's, the pain and suffering are very different. And so there's going to be pain, but it's our choice if we want to suffer. And it's going to be shitty. There's going to be moments where you're like, what the heck? But it's all worth it, because I don't think that we don't learn any other way as human beings. Someone's not going to give you something that's easier and be like, wow, what a great lesson. Yeah.
I was given this really powerful reframe recently, whereas like the idea of like soul contracts.
Yes.
That you like sign your soul contract beforehand.
Yes.
And so it's like, when you're going through the shit, if you can think of it in that way, you're like, I signed up for this.
Totally.
Like, I knew what this life was going to be beforehand, is the idea, for those who like haven't heard of that before. It's like, you signed up, you were presented this life beforehand and you signed up for it. You went, yes, because I know what's on the other side of that pain. I will sign up for it and get through it. And it's like, when you feel that in life, it's very powerful, but yeah, it's really hard to go through it at the time.
I've hung on to that too. I'm like, I signed up for this. Okay. Yep. Like we signed up for this together, whatever that narrative would be. I'm like, I always like to think of that too, as like, I just make the perception of whatever the situation is bigger and bigger until like I can grasp it. Yeah. And like, whether it's true or not true, this makes sense for me. I'm on board. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you being on board for coming back and doing another episode.
Yes.
It was so great to talk to you. There's so many other things that I wanted to ask you about, but to be respectful of time, we'll just have to do it again.
Yes.
Because there's so many other things I wanted to talk to you about. But
yes.
I hope you had a good time.
Yes, I did. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. And thanks to everybody for listening and watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.